Just cash your check. No Venmo, no.
How about the island of Manhattan?
No Venmo, there's your answer.
There you go.
Okay, beyond that, we're gonna go back to Lee Harvey Oswald.
Son of a bitch.
Well, we've had cookies, thank goodness, before we had clock trouble.
How do you really feel?
How I really feel. What a miserable human being he was. Good, and I like this, keep asking questions. I didn't doubt you would, especially on a topic like this. Yes.
Can you tell about that movie we saw, that What If?
Oh, yes. In terms of movies, I'll tell you about two movies quickly. One that Pat and I saw in the last month is called 11/22/63.
Oh, yeah, the Stephen King thing.
You seen it?
Yeah.
It's kind of what a time travel science fiction, and it's really well done.
Yep.
It's a man goes back in time travel, to try to save Kennedy.
Well, he kind of shows up at that period and realizes
Yeah.
what's gonna happen.
Knowing what happened,
Yeah.
he goes back to 1960, and then he's there for the next 1,000 days. And we won't give anything away, but it raises questions like, was he able to change history? Did he save Kennedy? Did he not save Kennedy? What would have happened? You know, it's really none of it's true, but it's very interesting.
That was that guy I saw crawling around.
Ah, that's right. I should add, none of it's true as far as we know. The second book, the second movie that I detest,
Oh, I know what
and
this
it's
is.
very well made,
JFK.
JFK made $1 gazillion. Oliver Stone made $1 zillion. It's a very well-made movie. It stars Kevin Costner and a cast of thousands. I mean, how can you miss? Kevin Costner plays James Garrison, the prosecutor in New Orleans. And there's at least one thing that the movie gets right. The president was shot on November 22nd. It is, in my opinion, the worst historical movie ever made. Even though it made zillions, and unfortunately, younger generations can easily watch it on streaming, and they don't watch the documentary, is my guess. They watch JFK,
And they believe it.
and they believe it. And they learn all these conspiracy garbage things. If you want sometime, I can bore you for as long as you want a critique of all the things they get wrong in JFK. Starting with, by the way, that Jim Garrison was a crackpot. Who brought the trial against David Ferry, and got national headlines for trying to prove the Kennedy assassination was a conspiracy. One last thing, the person that Costner plays, who looked nothing like Kevin Costner, James Garrison, ran for re-election after all this, and after the trial had fallen apart, and he was defeated. And the person who defeated him was anybody? Oh, please, I've forgotten his name now. His son is a famous jazz, American standard singer.
I know who you mean.
Connick.
Yeah.
Harry Connick.
Harry Connick.
Harry Connick Jr.
Yeah.
Harry Connick Sr.
Right.
is the person who defeated James Garrison for re-election. That's not terribly relevant, but I think it's interesting. Okay, We've been referring a lot to General
Ed
Walker. And here he is. This is a news we cover. Thunder on the right. Conservatives, radicals, the fanatic, something. Fringe, thank you. This is from 1963, although I can't make out the date. But he was getting a lot of attention. He had resigned from the Army. He'd actually tried to run for office once earlier. Now he's gearing up for a run for governor. He has huge ambitions for national office beyond governor. This is a guy who was, by the way, also a member of the John Birch Society. Would you remember that? He's on the board of directors, and he's also a advocate of segregation of the races in 1963. Not our cup of tea. Someone who, again, living in Texas, reading about Major General Edwin Walker all the time, getting incensed was Lee Harvey Oswald. So what does he do? He decides to stake out his home. Here's his home.
With the upside down flag.
Yeah, I know. I noticed that too, the upside down flag. I don't know the story on that unless he was just saying time of distress. Yeah, I thought that was.
You still see it.
Pardon me?
You still see it.
Oh, you've been there?
No. The upside down flag still shows up.
Oh, yeah. And you also, that area
Outside of Supreme.
here is his office, Walker's office. It was scoped out by Oswald. He took a bunch of photographs, and then he came back on April the 10th. This is 7 months before the Kennedy assassination. On April the 10th, he tries to assassinate General Walker. And he would tell people later, he told Marina all about this and boasted about it. He thought that Walker was the next Adolf Hitler. He's Army major.
He wanted to be.
Or wanted to be, right. And he did, in fact, on April the 10th, come back, fired his shot at the Walker home. It clipped a little bit of the windowsill and just sort of creased his hair. He was not hit beyond that. Kind of like the Trump thing year before last. And he was not seriously hurt at all, but he definitely heard the shot. He realized he almost been hit. And Oswald fires one shot. We believe, from what he told Marina, that he thought he killed him. He thought he hit him in the head. And he took off very quickly. He took off. There was a church letting out at that time, so blending into the church doors was easy.
With a rifle?
Oh, yeah. And the rifle in hand, which he had disassembled and so forth, the rifle in hand was the same rifle. The same rifle.
Every
Now-
church in that neighborhood came up with armed.
Well, that's true. We are talking about Texas. That's right. An unseen rifleman fired through a window and missed former Major General Edwin A. Walker by a scant inch in his home last night. Walker brushed fragments of glass from his hair as reporters arrived shortly after the incident, which he described as an attempted assassination around 9:30 o'clock. The police said that a night movement by Mr. Walker, a slight movement, at a desk working on his income tax I'll teach you. Presumably saved him. Somebody had a perfect bead on him, Detective Ira Van Cleve said. Whoever it was certainly wanted to kill him. The bullet from a .306 rifle was fired from an alley behind the Walker home. It went through wood framing the glass window. Wood framing the glass window. So now we have not only the rifle, now we have the rifle being used, and we have his first known attempted assassination.
I'm sure that bullet was discovered.
The bullet was discovered, yes, and by the way, later, the same bullet, yeah. That's exactly right. Now, something will bring up a question we had before. Oswald goes to New Orleans. He leaves Wednesday, April the 24th. This is again after the shooting attempt, leaving behind his pregnant wife. And this gets us to a very important person that nobody really knows. Her name is Ruth Paine, Paine. And this is Ruth Paine. She's early 30s. She and her husband own the home. That is Marina Oswald with their new baby. Now, baby was born very shortly before the assassination. Her horrid mother, Marguerite, who doesn't seem to want to pull up her hose.
That's Oswald's mother, right?
Mother-in-law, yeah.
That's Oswald's mother, Marguerite, that's right. So, mother-in-law of Marina. By the way, I don't know if I pointed out before now, I think I did, that Marina is still alive. And it's worth pausing for a second on Ruth Paine. Ruth Paine they all kind of lived in the same suburban area in Irving. People I'm going to be talking about. And at this point, Oswald although he's about to go to New Orleans, his wife pregnant. One of the reasons he's going by himself is that Marina and Lee are very estranged. Their marriage has gone through a lot of stress, and one of the primary reasons is that Lee beats her. Again, we're talking about a real swell guy here. He beats his wife. He even beat her when she was pregnant. When he knew she was pregnant. So she's semi-afraid of him. She's afraid of him. And she knows he can be very violent, can fly off the handle. And she also knows, because he's bragged to her, that he tried to assassinate some general. And she also knows he was dishonorably discharged and all that. One of the other things to tell you a little bit about his personality is Marina did not speak English. She spoke only Russian. And repeatedly, although Ruth Paine tried to help teach her a little English, but she basically knew almost no English. And she asked Lee over and over again to teach her, and he refused. Why? He wanted to keep her dumb. He didn't want her to speak English and broaden her circle and not be as dependent upon him. He wanted her to stay Russian only, and to converse with people, basically he had to go through Ruth, who knew some Russian, although she wasn't Russian, and also through himself primarily. Okay? I dwell on Ruth Paine because she only died last year, 92 as I believe. And again, she's also part of conspiracy theories. But you can go on YouTube you can find interviews with her, both at the time, there's one very good one from December of '63 with a local newsman in Dallas. And there's others throughout the years afterward. And my conclusion is that she was a pretty decent person. She was a Quaker. Her husband and she would eventually divorce, but not at this time. She was a Quaker. She was an educator. And she would try to go do good works for the rest of her life and philanthropic works, always knowing that she had helped Marina several times. When she first met Lee and Marina at a party, she immediately liked her and immediately disliked him. She took up, they lived near each other at the time. They struck up a friendship. She even went so far as to go down to New Orleans and get Marina at one point and bring her back because she knew that her husband was beating her, and he also knew that she was pregnant. And so at this time, when Oswald, why am I saying all this? When Oswald is leaving Wednesday, April 24th for New Orleans, she's left behind with Ruth Payne, which was very much what Marina Oswald wanted, and she was relieved actually. And I think it's pretty clear that Ruth Payne was doing this as a way to try to help her and protect her. Again, I can be wrong, although seldom, but my judgment is that Ruth Payne was a decent person. So, by himself, he goes to New Orleans. He starts handing out pamphlets.
Fair play for Cuba.
Fair play for Cuba. That's exactly right. And as two other people are helping him hand out pamphlets, pro-Castro pamphlets. He had gone to the unemployment office, offered two people whatever he offered them, $5, whatever, for a couple of hours to help him do this. So these are not necessarily political people. These are people who are getting $5 or whatever to help hand out his pamphlets. This is New Orleans. There are a lot of Cubans who have fled Castro and their families. This is not well received. Do we agree on that? August the 9th, he was there for New Orleans for a while. August the 9th, '63, one day Oswald gets into a scuffle. It was more pushing, shoving, yelling, vile things at each other with two residents of New Orleans who are Cuban exiles and who despised Fidel Castro for what he had done to their family and friends. So they get into a scuffle and pushing and shoving. The police come along and they arrest them. After a short time, the two anti-Castro people are let go. But Oswald, who again is not a New Orleans resident, is booked and kept overnight in jail. And there's his mugshot.
Go back to the last shot. I got it. Okay, now you've got three people there, other than Oswald himself, who you got marks over. All right.
These are people he hired.
Well, you got there's
There are two guys.
one is Oswald.
Two guys he hired.
Jim
Yeah,
and Mark.
and there's one over in the far right with a mark over his head. That looks like Jack Ruby. Now, is there a reason for the mark over that person's head?
No.
That's Jack Ruby before he gained 50 pounds. No, it's not Jack Ruby. As far as we don't believe so. Remember, Jack Ruby is running a strip club
I know.
in Dallas at this point. I don't think so.
But so the other two, one with the circle and the arrow, And the other fellow with the arrow over his head are people he's hired to,
Yeah, I believe so.
okay.
I believe so. And of course, they later would be found and interviewed, and they were released under the grounds that they didn't seem to know anything except that they were getting $5. There was something else I was going to say that you brought up there. While he's in jail, his night in jail.
Right.
That's what it was. Well, Oswald had his night in jail. He told police officer Lieutenant Martello, he bragged to him that he did not teach his wife, would not teach his children English, quote, because he hated America and did not want them to become Americanized, and that his real plans were to go back to Cuba, to go back to Russia. So again, he's not consistent. You'll see him talk about going to Cuba, going back to Russia. Anywhere he lived, he wasn't content for long. Local newspaper clipping, Lee Oswald, 23, was sentenced to pay a fine of $10. He was always broke, he didn't have $10. Or served 10 days in jail on charge of disturbing the peace by creating a scene. Oswald was arrested by 1st District Police at 4:15 p.m. while he was reportedly distributing pamphlets asking for fair play for Cuba. Police were called to the scene when three Cubans, not two, reportedly sought to stop Oswald. Municipal charges against the Cubans for disturbing the peace were dropped by the court. So he likes the fact he's getting some attention. That's Ruth again. But the other thing that is, you can find this also on YouTube, is fascinating, is one, he billed himself, and you see on the pamphlet, as chairman of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. There was, by the way, in New York, a Fair Play for Cuba Committee with which he corresponded. You know, it was sort of a communist front. Well, not was, what sort of was, it was. But that was fine, that didn't bother Oswald. But in terms of being chairman of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee in New Orleans, what else do we know about it?
He was the only member.
He was the only member.
Jim.
Yes, I'm sorry.
What, if he didn't have any money, where was he living? Who was paying him to do this? In New Orleans.
Right. He was staying at, for part of the time with a aunt and an uncle, although I don't know how friendly they were, because he called the aunt and asked her to come down and bail him out, and she didn't do it.
And he didn't have a $10.
So I don't think relations were that great. But he stayed there. He also stayed at one time near Canal Street in a flea bag of a hotel, the kind that would have, you know, cockroaches and so forth. Didn't stay there long. So most of the time, he stayed at his aunt's home with her husband. And in fact, there was one night over dinner, they got into a conversation, the husband and Lee, and it turned ugly, as you might guess. And later that night, not after the assassination, later that night, the husband said to Oswald's uncle, "That guy is one of the stupidest people I've ever met. He has one opinion, he doesn't want to hear any other opinion, and all he wants to do is basically talk. He doesn't want to listen. You know, let's get this guy out of here as soon as possible." So, very good question. Now, the next question, he gets out, the radio, did I mention the radio station?
Yeah.
Okay, he has the radio station interview, which was disastrous. And again, if you go, you don't believe me, or even if you do, go to Case Closed, the book by Gerald Osner. He has an addendum with a transcript of that radio debate. And you'll see how Oswald was just eviscerated. And happy 11:30 to you as well. Then this is something that's controversial and very good just for conspiracy theories. Oswald goes to Mexico City. He goes there, he leaves New Orleans. As it turned out, he's leaving New Orleans permanently. And he goes on September the 24th, he arrives in Mexico City, someplace I would not advise us to be today. And his purpose is he wants to meet with the Russian or Soviet embassy, and he wants their help in getting 2 visas to Cuba. And from, now again, this gets sketchy. He's at the Soviet embassy in Mexico City. They tell me he needs a photograph. He goes to the Mexican embassy, gets a photograph taken, brings it back. There's a lot of back and forth. We think there's some conversation with someone in the Soviet Union, and they have a problem. They've already kicked him out once, and they don't really want him back. Cuba, they're ambivalent on that. He meets with Oleg Nachiparenko at the Soviet embassy in Mexico City. I won't bother to spell it, but you're welcome. And over 2 days, September 27th and 28th, 1963, he tries everything to get 2 visas, Marina and himself, and for Cuba, and fails. They eventually turn him down. And again, I think in fact, he defected and then redefected and all that could well have been a reason. Now again, this is where we don't have documentation. So if you're a conspiracy, we know he was there. But we also know that the bus ticket he bought to get there, there was no question he was there on those dates. But we don't know exactly what was said. Later, the KGB agent would say, several years later, that what I told you is basically what happened. But he is a retired KGB agent, so maybe so, maybe not. This is one of the very more fruitful areas for conspiracy theorists because it is kind of a black hole. And some have argued, no, he went there to get his final instructions to kill JFK. I don't know why he'd have to go to Mexico to do that, but that is a conspiracy theory.
Yeah, you're plenty of Soviet agents in Dallas.
Yeah, that's right. There were Soviet agents in Dallas. He comes back for the last time. He comes back to Dallas. And again, when I said he comes back, remember, they're estranged. Marina's living with Ruth Payne. He's living in various very inexpensive rundown apartments. And they meet from time to time, usually over the weekends. And I'll come back to that. And he begins to act very even strange for Oswald, according to Marina. And she says he's very sullen. He tells her what a disaster it was. He's very angry at the bureaucrats in the Cuban embassy who would not get him. He thought it should have been no-brainer. They would not give him visas to go to Cuba to fight for the true Marxists, Fidel Castro. He also tells her in more detail about his debate in New Orleans, and even acknowledges that it did not go well. And although he said he was tricked, and that's why it didn't go well. And she begins to notice, even for Lee Oswald, he's more and more sullen. And she notices, although, again, to be fair, she says this after the assassination. So you always have to take it with a certain grain of salt. But she says after the assassination, at this point she notices he is sitting outside at night with his rifle, practicing the bolt action over and over and over again. The bolt action, firing, with no gun in the chamber, doing it, clearly trying to get it to appear more proficient and more accurate. Yes.
Let's roll back a little bit. One thing doesn't make sense to me.
Okay.
He had 2 small children. He only asked for 2 visas.
I take it back. I did say that, and that would be wrong. He wanted, at the time he wanted 3, because the 4th child hadn't been born yet. So you're right, good catch. He asked for 3, and in the hope that they get there before the 4th was born. Very good catch. I get nothing by this guy. Does someone else have their hand up? So again, she says, and again, you can take it any way we want. I'm not sure if she's accurate or not, but she says that she saw him practicing, sometimes she said for hours, and then he would also say he was going to go for rifle practice, and would take the rifle, not the gun usually, but the rifle, and go wherever for a couple of hours. Now again, how much of that? But that appears to be what was happening.
Well, obviously it couldn't be after the assassination, because he was, went to the theater and wherever he could to avoid the police.
Well, that's exactly, he did.
Yeah.
By now, again, he knew the FBI
Yeah.
had him under surveillance.
Yeah.
And he suspected the CIA did, and he would have taken precautions, one would think. Okay, this is something that, by the way, this is again Ruth Payne, somebody who really should be mentioned more than she is, because her role in trying to help Marina Oswald, and it got to a point where Lee would be there often on a Friday and then go back to work on a Monday. So she knew him, although as she and others would say, no one liked him. They liked her, they felt sorry for her. They know she was being beaten and that she was pregnant, and they kind of just put up with him. One question that comes up is, isn't it suspicious, isn't it odd that Oswald, now in living in Irving, suburb of Dallas, gets a job in Dallas at the School Book Depository, which is right where JFK's parade route is going to pass? Isn't that odd? Isn't that convenient? Isn't that evidence of a conspiracy? Well, no. And the story, as I understand it, is that Ruth Payne had coffee with friends, always a dangerous thing back then, had coffee with friends on Monday, October the 14th. She brought Marina, who didn't speak English, with her, and now she's very close to giving birth a second time. And during the coffee and pastries, the conversation turns to the fact that her husband, Lee, needs a job. He's back, he doesn't have a job, he's applied for a couple, he's been turned down, has not been hired, and they're broke. And one woman who, in this coffee klatch, can I say coffee clutch?
Clutch.
Okay. Her name is Lenny Mae Randall. We're in the South. Lenny Mae Randall, Randle, mentioned during this conversation that she had a younger brother, Wesley Frazier, Frazier, who, much like Lee Oswald, had been unemployed. He was 19 years old and had been turned down for several jobs. Like Lee Oswald, he didn't have much in the way of education, hadn't graduated from high school, hadn't distinguished himself, but that he had just got a job in October. Finally, he landed a job as a clerk at the Texas School Book Depository. And she recommended, she says, you know, I think it's their busy time cranking up for the holidays. Maybe you ought to have your husband, Marina, apply there. My brother got a job. Maybe he will. When I say brother, it's actually younger brother. Okay. Well, after a little prodding from both Ruth Payne and from Marina Oswald, Oswald applied for the job. He applied for the job on Tuesday, October 15th. Notice how close we're getting to the assassination. The guy who ran, this is basically a warehouse. They had a couple, they stored and sold textbooks, the book depository, and this is the guy who was the foreman at the Dealey House book depository. His name was Roy Truly. Truly it is. Truly. He interviews Oswald. He's had a little prep at the urging of Marina. Ruth Payne, again, who seems to be a nice person, had called and said, by the way, this guy's coming in. His wife is about to give birth to a baby. He needs work. You hired my brother last month. Give the guy a hearing. So he met Oswald with the knowledge that he had sort of a recommendation and that he was a guy whose wife was about to give birth to a baby.
Jim,
Yes.
had the route that JFK was gonna take been published at the time?
No.
When he got this job?
No.
That's what I thought.
That's another thing that's a problem with the conspiracy theory. The route had not been announced yet. So no one knew it was going to go right by the book depository. Very good point. In the interview, which was brief, apparently Oswald does reasonably well, and he did what he always does. He lied. And he said he was honorably discharged from the Marines recently. When asked, he said he'd never been in trouble with the police. And of course, there's a mugshot of him in New Orleans. And that, he really could use this job because his wife was about to give birth. Truly had two possible openings that he could offer Oswald. He made clear that they were temporary jobs, they were not permanent, but for several weeks, maybe a couple of months, something like that, and then we'll see. The temporary job, one was in a storage warehouse that was some distance from Dealey Plaza. The other was as a clerk right there where they were in Dealey Plaza in the book depository. Truly offers him the temporary job at the main building. This is the main building. And told him he could start the next day, October the 16th, which he accepted. Why the 16th? It was going to be the beginning of the next pay period. And I should point out, by the way, this is not a sterling character. He's a racist. He threw around the N-word all the time. He actually didn't like Kennedy, because he called him a race mixer. He's a pretty disgusting person. But we don't know that that was a factor in being hired. Probably very unlikely. Now this is where, again, I differ with Jim Garrison, who is the prosecutor in New Orleans, who will later become famous and will be the genesis for JFK the movie. In fact, if you ever watch it, and I hope you don't, you can watch it. If you ever watch it, there's a scene where Kevin Costner and Jim Garrison is talking to a judge, and the judge is Jim Garrison in a cameo role. Jim Garrison would write later in his book about the assassination and his involvement in the aftermath and investigation. He'd write, quote, "Guiding hands made sure that he would be at the right place at the right time." So there we go. Some mysterious force made sure that he applied for a job at the depository so he'd be in the right place at the right time.
Same guiding hand changed Kennedy's route.
Right, yeah. What's the problem with that? Kennedy's route was not known yet, had not been announced. Whether or not he was going to go from Love Field through town to the Trade Mart was not certain at that point. They had a couple of alternate routes. In fact, they hadn't even, although this is October, White House hadn't even announced that JFK was going to Texas until September 25th. So it wasn't, what? It wasn't, there's a big hole in Jim Garrison's theory. Also, and you can repeat this over and over again on a lot of conspiracy theories. Let's say Garrison was right. Let's say that it was a conspiracy, as he says, get him in the right place at the right time by guiding hands. Well, besides the fact no motorcade had been proposed by that date, it wasn't until November the 14th, and we're talking about October the 18th, that it was announced that the president would speak at the Trade Mart. Come in Love Field, they would go the parade route through, and there were alternative routes through Dallas, and then he would speak at the Trade Mart. That wasn't announced until after Oswald had been hired and started the work. And you have to also say, well, if there was a conspiracy, it must have also involved this guy. It must have involved, Oswald had applied for 2 other jobs that week and been turned down. Those guys must have been part of the conspiracy, turning him down so he'd wind up here. There was a guy that he applied to that week who actually, now he turned it down, but when he got a call from his next potential employer, said, don't hire him. He's not reliable. So he'd be part of the conspiracy. As with most of the stories, for conspiracies to be true, it has to involve lots and lots and lots of people. And someone mapped out just what Garrison said, that guiding hands is why he wound up being hired at the book depository, and figured that there were about a dozen people who would have had to be part of the conspiracy.
I blame Ruth Bain.
I blame Ruth Bain, yeah. Ruth Bain's the pain.
I blame Khrushchev.
Khrushchev.
What jobs did he apply to that he couldn't get, like provost of Texas State or something?
They were, minimum wage jobs, clerk kind of
I just had
jobs.
to give a
Dishwasher.
joke out.
Yeah, it's a good joke. Do you all hear his joke? It's a good joke.
Repeat it.
Yeah, we're gonna time.
Okay, getting close? Okay, what do we have, about 15? Okay, how much time do we have?
15 seconds.
Oh, oh, okay. Then let me make one more point if I may, and not surprisingly, we'll carry this over to next month. And if you want to know whether or not the president was assassinated, you'll have to come back. But let me add one last point. This is someone that it's agonizing how close he came to finding Oswald, but didn't. His name is James Hosty, Hosty. James Hosty is a FBI agent in Dallas. He was the one, remember a while back I told you, reopened the Oswald case, asked for the files to be sent to him. And of course, none of this was something that Oswald knew at the time. At the same time, October 25th now it is, shortly after he'd been hired, Oswald himself had gone unlikely to an ACLU meeting that night.
American Civil Liberties Union.
American Civil Liberties Union. He had gone to, and he actually took out a membership card. Later we learned he thought that if you were an ACLU member, you got 3 free lawyers, which of course wasn't quite the case. And he also had been told that they were very left-wing, so he wanted to see if there was any commonality there. But while he's at the ACL meeting, James Hosty learned, again, from one of his sources, that another agency, the Central Intelligence Agency, had determined that Oswald had been in contact with the Soviet embassy in Mexico City in the early part of October. So the CIA and now the FBI agent, they were on to that. This greatly increases FBI agent Hosty's interest in Oswald even further. I mean, we're dealing with espionage here. So on Friday, November the 1st, now we're 3 weeks away, Hosty went to Irving and he interviewed Ruth Payne, who's been maligned here a moment ago, Ruth Payne, for about 25 minutes, and joining her near the end of the conversation is Marina Oswald. So he interviewed both of them. And the last thing I'm going to say is that night, when Lee Harvey Oswald gets home and learned that there had been an FBI agent talking to his wife and the lady whose home she was staying in, he went ballistic. No, yeah. And again, you can kind of see the vice beginning to tighten to some extent. I've always thought, wow, with this guy, he was getting close. He was even talking to Oswald's wife, and he was getting information from the CIA that he'd been to Mexico City and been at the Soviet and Cuban embassies. I think they only knew the Soviet at that point. But I mean, he's beginning to put pieces together. But he only has 21 days.
And he doesn't know that.
And of course, he doesn't know that. So, on that note, we will stop.
You let my coffee spill before I do.